Hello everyone, this is Crota giving you a shoutcast between mTw Dimaga and Hasu here on Shakuras Plateau. Dimaga spawning over here on the top right hand side of the map as the red Zerg player. Meanwhile, Mouz Hasu spawning as the blue Protoss. So this will be Protoss versus Zerg here on Shakuras Plateau. Obviously, this game I believe was taken from the European servers. Homer J, one of my other shoutcasting friends on my channel, broadcasting a lot of the European games. Now we have Hasu down over here on the bottom right hand side, Zerg versus Protoss, and I'm curious to see how this matchup will go. This game was pretty highly rated, so I wanted to know basically why this game was highly rated. And now as this game gets underway, just a couple of my predictions in a Protoss versus Zerg matchup. Now, both of these players know that the other opponent cannot spawn on their ally positioning, so both players are already sending their unit across the map, and now we see a drone and a probe cross each other in the center of the map over here. Back and taking a look at the bases, we now see Dimaga currently getting up to 13/18, and will either be trying to go for a hatchery or go for a spawning pool. Now, the main reason why Dimaga would not want to go for a hatchery in this particular map is just because there's only 7 mineral patches out here instead of the standard 8. So a fast expansion would not be quite as beneficial in the early portion of the game, as you're only mining from 16 as compared to 15. But then again, I have seen a lot of Zerg players try to do an expansion down here as well, and it looks like that is going to be the case. So it looks like he is going to try to expand into that location, going into 16/18 food. And wow, that is a lot of drones now being produced and now trying to make its way down over here. No, sitting at 300 minerals now. It does not look like there's a drone down here, so I'm curious as to what exactly he's going for. And Dimaga is going for a second hatchery within his base. That is a very curious move, as the probe now comes in over here and will quickly come across this positioning and see that there is the second hatchery. And now I'm a little bit baffled by what the strategy is going to be. I also like the placement on this front door by Hasu. Hasu down over here with this forge on the low ground will make a little bit of a tighter choke point. In addition, there is also a drone trying to deny an expansion and doing a great job so far. So Hasu has not been able to set up his nexus for quite some time. However, the drone has been killed. And now Hasu going for a fast expansion. Meanwhile, Dimaga not going for the fast expansion. So this is a little bit of a crazy gameplay. And now it looks as though Dimaga will be running off of 3 hatcheries in just a moment. Alright, so this is already not your typical Zerg versus Protoss game. You can see that Dimaga now going for that 3rd hatchery. And with that 3rd hatchery, it's going to open up a number of different possibilities. He will not need to get as many queens early on. However, if the Hasu tries and realizes the fact that he's not going to need that many queens, he will be able to go for phoenixes. However, Hasu could go for, Dimaga could go for a lot of queens and then just use those queens to make a creep highway, and that does seem to be the case. 3 hatcheries, he will be able to mass up a lot of queens. Mass queens would be quite interesting to see, as queens are not light or armored units, so they do not take any additional damage from those stalkers, and they do not take additional damage even when graviton beamed by a phoenix either. So back here we now have 1 photon cannon, and I like the positioning on these photon cannons by Hasu. Hasu has a very secure front door expansion that will be able to protect this nexus for quite some time, and Hasu will be mining off of 15 mineral patches for quite some time. Taking a look at the harvester and the harvester count right now, 22 harvesters for Hasu. Dimaga sitting at 24, and now we're going into a 4th hatchery. So Dimaga now expanding across the map into a number of different locations. Quite curious as to why he decided to take this hatchery down here as opposed to this other set of mineral patches here. I believe this set of mineral patches does have 8. Or no, does it have 7 again? Yeah, it only has 7 once again. So I guess this is a little bit further from his opponent's base, and also will not be revealed when activating the Zelnaga Watchtower. So nicely done there so far, as we now have 1 probe and 2 Zerglings making their way out. We'll be able to get some damage onto that probe. That probe already down to 5 shields, and now trying to run away from that Zergling. The Zergling should be able to get another peck in just a moment, as we have more and more units being trained. I do not see any additional queens, so a little bit curious as to that, as now that probe now on creep will get taken down by those Zerglings very quickly, and down it goes, unable to see any of the tech buildings of Dimaga. I would believe at this time that Dimaga needs to go for roaches and queens, at this stage in the game. If he goes for the roaches, he will be able to handle any significant ground army that comes out, and then the queens will be able to handle void rays and phoenixes, unless we have Hasu going into a critical mass of those units. An Overlord now perhaps going to try to fly straight into the space here, except all the tech buildings right over here at this front door, and Hasu going for a 2 Stargate build. So should I call this a double gate? A double 2 gate, as there's 2 gateways and 2 Stargates now on the ground. We now have also Phoenixes being chrono boosted, a lot of chrono boost energy between these 2 nexuses, as now this hatchery will get underway as well. I'm a little curious as to why more queens are not being trained. Dimaga doesn't really necessarily need the queens for larva production, as his larva production is quite high already. Each of these hatcheries generate 4 larvae every game minute, and then the queen is able to generate an additional 4 every 40 seconds. So that's, if you're wondering as a Zerg player how to get all those numbers, you get approximately rounded over time 10 larvae per hatchery if you have queens as well. An Overlord now flying into position will see the double assimilator gas down here, but that's about it. He does not see any of those Stargates over here to the north, and because he does not know about those Stargates, he will not be able to get enough counter units. However, a Hydralisk Den already in play. So as a Hydralisk Den is in play, a lot of Hydralisks will be able to pop out and perhaps try to shoot down those Phoenixes. The issue, though, is with enough Phoenixes in the air reaching critical mass, those Phoenixes semi-counter Hydralisk because they're able to Graviton Beam a Hydralisk, and a Hydralisk takes 20 damage per attack with a fairly fast attack rate of 1.1. So every game second, or almost every game second, able to fire and deal damage. Queens now down over here will be able to get off some of those acid spines, now trying to come in. Overlords now in the air. However, they will be fairly well protected. Now more Phoenixes gathering out here. We only have 1 queen here, and that's going to be quickly Graviton beamed. We also have the groove spines currently being researched. No queens making their way over. No transfusion to save it. No transfusion to save. Overlord now getting shot down as well. No transfusion energy to be seen, as another Phoenix now Graviton beaming another queen here. So that queen will get shot down, and a second queen getting shot down as well. Definitely needs more and more queens. Groove spines still being researched, as these Phoenixes will just have their way with a lot of these units very, very shortly. Overlords now supply locking Dimaga. Dimaga needs to get Overlords as well. However, Hydralisks quickly coming out. You can see that those Hydralisks are now being Graviton beamed as well, and this is one of the reasons why the Hydralisk definitely needed to macro up and try to get into position. So many Phoenixes now in the air. However, there is an expansion down over here with also 2 queens and also a spore crawler. So this is more of a shock to Hasu, as Hasu now quickly realizing that he is not in the same economic lead that he thought he was in. Now trying to come back, and more queens down over here. No Hydralisk being trained in this position. Are there? No Hydralisk being trained, as they are all Overlords. Another queen getting Graviton beamed, and these Phoenixes now almost with that level 1 weapons upgrade. So those Phoenixes will now be able to deal 12 damage per attack instead of just that simple 10. Spore Crawlers in the back able to get off, no, not able to get off any kills here, but there are currently 5 Phoenixes in the air doing that Phoenix walk, dealing damage across all those Overlords. Overlords now just splattering all of their gooey guts on top of those drones. Poor Overlords just want to feed that Zerg army. Hydralisks now making their way out. Hydralisks do in fact have a range upgrade, so they will be able to shoot at these Phoenixes before they get down. However, the Phoenix is now dealing 22 damage per attack against those Hydralisks, and this is going to be a very, very bad sign indeed. Graviton beaming, Zealots also coming out to engage. Phoenix is able to pick off more and more Hydralisks, just serving them up on a Graviton platter, and those Phoenixes just dominating the air, owning the air, and making the Zerg player confined to a measly 3 bases. In a normal game situation, I would say 3 bases is plenty for Dimaga. However, his harvester count is about even, except he also has an economic gain. So we'll see how exactly Hasu is going to try to change this up. We are getting the level 1 weapons upgrade. As more Zealots are being trained, we should also be getting Charge. Charge needs to be researched, otherwise those Hydralisks are going to be able to shoot down those Zealots before any damage is dealt. We are now getting into a massive army for Dimaga. Dimaga now sitting on what appears to be 15 Hydralisks, no, 16 Hydralisks, and 3 Roaches. Those Roaches should probably be in that front line just a little bit more. Roaches have a natural 1 armor with an additional +1 armor on that Carapace upgrade, will be taking significantly less damage from those Zealots. Zealots would normally deal, I believe, 9 times 2 in just a moment, except for it's going to be 7 times 2, so 14 damage instead of 18 damage from those Zealots. Hydralisks now making their way out across the map, trying to look for if there's any additional expansions being placed down. One Roach now walking off to that north side. The Roach does have the movement upgrade and will quickly spot out this location as these units now reaching back over here. I am curious as to why we do not see any creeps or creep tumors being laid down by Dimaga. Dimaga definitely could get a lot of creep tumors, and now you can see his hatchery production is simply through the roof. So on 4, 5, and 6, between those he has a lot of larvae now just starting to macro up production wise. 7 roaches, level 2 missile upgrades and level 2 carapace upgrade, and also getting a spire. In comes a fight in the center, and those hydralisks able to shoot down many of those phoenixes once again, and those phoenixes need to change things up a little bit. Or sorry, Hasu needs to change things up, and now with a Colossus being trained, that is the exact change that Hasu needs in order to try to counteract this Roach Hydralisk army. Back over here, we do see an expansion by Hasu now being placed down. Assimilators are already up as these units now trying to set up in this position over here. Most likely, Dimaga realizes that Hasu has this one expansion, the only expansion he has not seen so far. Zealots now making their way over. Zealots with that charge upgrade have a naturally faster movement speed, as well as they're going to try to get in this position here. Roaches and Hydralisks now going to turn around and deal a lot of damage very quickly. Only 1 Colossus, and without any extended thermal lance range, it's going to be fairly difficult. However, a lot of force fields coming into play, making it very difficult. 1 Phoenix in the air also getting shot down without that extended thermal lance range. The Colossus was not able to get a lot of free shots into this group, as this army of Hydralisks now trying to come into position. Roaches now being trained as well. 10 more Roaches, and level 2 weapons upgrade nearing completion. As this fight continues, Roaches now trying to scamper forward, moving in and within range of those Zealots. Roaches now trying to come back over here. Hydralisks continuing to push, trying to confine Hasu into one base, as these Hydralisks are now simply trying to mow over all of these Colossi. The Colossi still don't have the extended thermal lance range, and will not for quite some time, as it is not being researched. Colossus will get taken down to a mere 1 hit point. However, Roach trying to get in range, finally able to get it down, as more Hydralisks coming into position. A Roach now trying to come in as well. However, that 1 Immortal will not be able to do very much at all against these Hydralisks. The Hydralisks actually out-damage the Immortal significantly with a faster attack rate and a higher base damage. So both sides continuing to fight. Roaches now coming in over here, trying to get into proper position. You can see Hasu picking apart this expansion while setting up his units for the next charge. I really like this play. However, he's going to have a very difficult time trying to walk up this choke point. The splash range on a Colossus is just enough, I think, to cover this whole entire ramp here. And if the units get stuck with even a force field behind them, all of those units would just be like lambs to the slaughter, sitting on a ramp, unable to do very much at all. We now see Dimaga going into a 4th base here, as now those Phoenixes continue to try to hunt more and more Overlords. However, even with that movement upgrade speed, those Overlords, no match for the fast movement speed of those Phoenixes. And now a 3rd base being set up over here. Roaches now trying to slash their way at these pylons. Pylons taking some damage, and now going after the Nexus instead. So, instead going back after this 1 pylon, wanting to make sure that no additional reinforcements are warped in. And with Dimaga confining his opponent, he's in a very, very strong position, and indeed, in order to take this game from Hasu. Hasu now also going into Psionic Storm. So Psi Storm now currently being researched as Dimaga goes in, also moves into Corruptors. So those Corruptors will be a strong counter towards those Colossi that are now in the air. Overlords now preparing to do a drop perhaps, and now so many Overlords, those Stalkers and those High Templars unable to know where to essentially drop anything else, and now all the Overlords dropping creep. So nicely done, dropping creep into the space. The Hydralisks and those Roaches will have faster movement speed. Peons, or what, those probes down over here, unable to really do anything else. Perhaps they're going to join in on that fight, trying to take down some of those Roaches, and now waiting for Psi Storm to be completed. Psi Storm has been completed, however, probes will get taken down very easily as more units continue to warp in. Zealots will be charging in just a moment. Now we see Psionic Storm just hitting a bunch of Roaches. However, the Roaches are now trying to push back. It looks as though Dimaga in a very, very strong position, finishing off this last Colossi here. This Colossus taking significant damage from those Corruptors, and those Corruptors now just in the air, able to just contain his opponent, getting the proper counter units. Hasu unable to do anything at all this game. I think really the situation in this game was that Dimaga was able to establish a third base very, very early. And with a third base, he was able to train up a lot of queens. Each of these hatcheries were training queens consistently throughout the map, or throughout the time, able to get a lot of spawn larvae. And then across all of these hatcheries, you could see at some point 10 larvae on some of them, meaning that he was not missing even one spawn larva. And then able to just pump out units like none other. Already at 2025 in terms of mineral count, and he's currently producing 18 roaches. So those roaches would have been able to deal a lot of damage as well. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this 1v1 replay between Dimaga and Hasu here on Shakuras Plateau.